All righty. Hello, Aliza. Thank you for being with me
Hello.
on a beautiful Sunday morning.
You're welcome. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Great. Now, for those of you listening, Aliza is a BCBA with 8 years of experience working with individuals on the autism spectrum and other related disorders. She has worked with children as well as adults, age ranging between 1 to 28 years old, across 2 countries, her native Malaysia and also the UAE. She currently works as a clinical supervisor at a Center for Children with ASD in Abu Dhabi, and her work involves overseeing direct intervention and training parents. So she's joining me today and we're going to be talking about best practices for effective parent collaboration. All right, so
That's
thank
right.
you again, Aliza, for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now, Lisa, basically, in my experience, I've been a teacher, I've been a therapist as well. And I have had moments where this is something that I was told before I started my teaching career in special education. And a much senior, oh, hey there, we have another
This is my cat, Toby.
Yeah, so I have been told explicitly that, you know what, don't give in too much of yourself to children, to children whose parents are not equally invested as you are. Because as teachers, we get carried away. We are always told that, have high expectations from your students, believe in your kids, and that is how it should be. Your child will only deliver as much as you expect from them.
Exactly.
But a lot of times what happens is that is not shared by the parents, those expectations. And so it becomes a one-sided thing. And when I went in, I was told that only put in enough of yourself as much as the parent is willing to put in.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. And I just want to ask you that, have you had, I mean, obviously that's probably not what you went in with your, work experience, but how true or how relevant do you think that statement is, like with your 8 years of experience?
I think I've been quite lucky to work in places where everybody is very empathetic and very inclusive, and it's always about empowering the family and about empowering the parents, especially because if you think about it, we therapists come and go, right? Teachers also come and go. The most that we're going to work with a child is for a certain number of years. But the only constant in the child's life is the parents. So yeah, whatever therapy that we do, the parents need to be on board, and they need to have a certain level of understanding so that they can carry on with whatever that we do. And most of the time we see kids, especially on the autism spectrum, for early intervention. And then they will go on to school, hopefully, right? That's the whole point of early intervention. And we need for them to keep growing, the parents have to understand how to work with their kids, not just working, like doing homework or anything like that, but even how to speak to their children, how to structure their day, how to make visual schedules or any type of visuals, for example, that could help the kids in their day-to-day life. How to make like even daily routines and make visual schedule those daily routines, because kids grow, right? Your routine when you're 3 will not be the same as when you're 13, for example. So yeah, if a parent doesn't know how to modify those things and change with the child over time, then how will the child grow, essentially? Yeah, so I've always I've been lucky, like I said, in my experience, we've always tried to educate the parents in some way. And I think that's one of the most important things that you have to do as a therapist.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, you were talking about parent training, and that is so important because one of the examples that I can give is with my own son. When he was learning independent skills through visual schedules, right? When necessarily visual schedules by using visuals to help him become independent. And one of the things he used to work on was getting ready.
Yeah.
For us, we say you
Bring
have
on
to get ready.
clothes.
Yeah, but there's so
Yeah.
many tasks involved in getting ready,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And because we were trained to learn how to break down those tasks, like just find it, putting on your pants, putting on your underpants, putting on your shirt, socks,
Exactly.
deo, washing. There's just so many
Yeah.
things. And as parents, because this is like, it's such a natural thing for us, we don't realize that there's so many things involved in
Absolutely.
and because I was lucky to get trained, and I had an absolutely amazing therapist working with my son. We were able to break down that, and till today, because I didn't practice it on my other neurotypical kids, Suleiman is the only one who will make sure that he has, because he's now internalized this checklist that I have to
That's
do
amazing.
this. So he will
Yes.
always be at the door having done all those things. And my other kids, I'll be looking at them like, you're not wearing deo, or you forgot to comb your hair, or there's something they've missed.
Yeah.
Something they've missed. So parent training is so important, uh, because then I was able to
Exactly.
teach Suleiman that at home. That's not something he can necessarily do in school, getting
Yeah.
ready in school, or at a center. But because there's certain things at a center that your child cannot do at the center.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they can practice it, but
Yeah.
functionally, you shower in the morning and at night,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? At the
And
beginning of the
how you
day
use the shower
and
also.
yeah,
How you put
yeah,
soap, how you put shampoo. That's not something you can do at the center. They can just teach you, but you have to actually do it at home
at
with a
home,
parent
you have
who
to practice
understands
it.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason why I started this podcast, because there's with this topic and with that story, is because that's something that parents often forget and then end up putting too much of that workload and expectation on the center.
Yes,
And that can
exactly.
sometimes be a bit unrealistic. And what ends up happening is that the parent is shopping for centers,
Yes. Yeah.
because they will be like, I want my child to learn this skill. Yes, but your child hasn't mastered the prerequisites for that
Yeah.
yet.
Yes.
And that's
And even
when
then,
talking. Sorry. Yeah.
exactly. So you were saying about like prerequisites and my child wants to master this skill. This is something that not all parents keep in mind.
Yeah.
Like the expectation is up there, but the child is still here and we need this to fill up this gap. This is not something that all parents know about. So again, parent education, they need to know like how, for example, developmental milestones, how it works, how to see whether the child has reached a milestone, what is a milestone. Yeah, so those kinds of things, like it doesn't always come naturally for parents because parents have other jobs and they specialize in other things. It might not be something that they've been ever exposed to, right?
So
Yeah.
that is something on the center then to, before they've, dived right into IEPs and all of that. That is something probably centers should take into account, to spend some time walking parents through these milestones and talking about its relevance, its importance, the prerequisites that are needed to achieve the milestone which the child is not achieving.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? That is something that the center can do. Now, in terms of how, in your experience, how has it been with getting feedback from parents when you suppose you implement a new intervention, a new type of, you're teaching a new skill. What kind of feedback would a center want, would a therapist want from a parent to make sure that this collaboration or this teamwork, works for both and for the child mainly? Is that clear?
Yeah. I think it's a very complicated answer. I think it needs to start from where you begin. So from the planning stages. So I always try to plan my IEPs or my goals according to the rationale of why do we need to do this? Because sometimes, in the field as BCBAs, we have all our assessments and our curriculums, and sometimes we just go through the motion. This is mastered and then we go on to the next one, but we don't think like for the bigger picture, like, is it a functional skill for the child? Can we do this somehow differently? So I always come from a rationale, and then I try to communicate that to the parents so they understand why are we working on this skill and how we are working on this skill. So the feedback that I would like from the parents is to know that they are practicing something that could support that learning at home. So for example, if I'm working on responding to name, it would be good if the parents are also working on responding to name. But I always remind parents, when you call a child's name, always follow with something fun or something they like. Never call them to do chores or to ask them to do things, because that is something that they will learn. So you always want to follow whatever instruction that you give with something nice, something fun, something good.
I like that. I really like that, because I mean, I'm now thinking of how many times I've actually done that or not done that.
I mean,
it's so right, because we do this whole concept of pairing in ABA, and then mom's voice is automatically associated with you've messed up somewhere, or she wants me to do a chore. That is so true. I love that one.
If you think about real life, right? Usually when your mom calls you, Aliza, it's usually, oh no, what now?
My mom won't be calling me to tell me how much she loves me, really.
Yeah. Exactly. When you're little, when you're a teenager, it's always, why is your room so messy? This kind of stuff. And then we associate our mom calling us with something bad or something like, something to avoid. So we don't want that, especially in the early intervention phase. We always want to call the name and say, wow, I like how you're looking at me. That's so nice. Come, let's go to the playground, for example.
Yeah, I like that. And you know what? I'm like, a lot of my experiences and a lot of questions I ask you are driven by the fact that I've been a parent and I've been a therapist to my own child as well. And there has been good in that and then some negatives in that. I had to unlearn a lot of things in the process. And the main one was that in the process of raising my special needs child, I was more of a therapist to him than a parent, because I was so gung-ho that I have to carry through whatever he's doing at the center, because he's only there for 45 minutes or an hour. I have to carry that on for the rest of the day. So I would take on the role of that therapist.
Understand.
I'm not a mom.
So you're doing
I'm not a mom to him.
You're a second therapist.
I've turned my house into a center. And I literally did that. I'm not just talking about me being a therapist. His room was like an OT room.
Wow.
Yeah, I brought all, the training balls, the swings, and everything, you name it. It was like a little OT room that he had. And then he had a desk, he had visuals everywhere. And every time I'd get up, I remember I would tell him to get up and then, follow through. So I was a great team for a therapist, but my child wanted a mother.
Exactly.
So that's a bit tough. Where do you draw the line? Because I have a lot of parents asking me the same thing. They're doing the same thing that I did. Because I've done NLP, I've got that background as well. I have to always tell them that I've walked down that road. And trust me, you have to find a balance.
For sure.
Child needs all those things. But, there has to be a balance. He needs a mom.
Yes, absolutely.
That trumps everything. Now, that is something that I don't, obviously at a center, is that something that they should also remind parents of, that, yes, these are the things you need to follow up on at home, but how can you bring the mom element in this? Do you think that is something that centers should also look into, should think about, rather than, say that this is an IEP and this is what we have to follow through, and we'll train you to become another version of us, and you have to follow through on this. What is your take on that?
That's a very interesting perspective, because I never thought about like parents who are so invested in ABA that they become therapists. Like we don't have the expectations of parents when we
Yeah.
start parent training,
Yeah,
right? And I think it's
exactly.
up to the BCBA or whoever that is doing the training to understand what they are doing and to again look at the bigger picture. So for example, if I were to teach a child labeling, I'm teaching a child like a bunch of labeling, right? And maybe he has some of those labels already. So let's say in his repertoire, he has 10 labels. So then I would say to parents like something like, he knows some labels in regards to food, like cup and plate and stuff like that. So I would tell them, when you're having dinner, how about you put out the food, but then you hide his plate and then make him ask for the plate. Yeah, and then at the restaurant, maybe you can call the waiter and make the waiter ask him what he needs. Yeah, so instead of like working with the cards like we do, like, with flashcards, make it generalized, make it functional. Yeah. I always tell parents, for example, the first words that a child learns is always those that is within their routine, and it's always those that they encounter every day. So things like toothpaste, toothbrush, bed, pillow, those are things that they encounter every day. Right? So when I first talk to parents, I always tell them, try to label what you are doing with your child. And this is two-pronged. One, yes, you're teaching the skill of tacting or the label of the item, but also you're pairing with them. So for example, you should make the bed together. Ask him to bring the pillow. Yeah, or if he doesn't have that skill, you can say, oh, let's put on the pillow on the bed. Let's put let's fluff up the pillow, for example. So if you're saying all those things, he is learning those words by association. If you repeat it every day, for a year, that's 365 repetitions.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're talking to your child every day, he will pick it up, especially, and you're strengthening that skill also at the center because we are also practicing, right?
Yeah.
So then you are building the association just by doing everyday
activities. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, recently a parent came to me and said to me, there was one day we went to the restaurant and he was hungry, it was late, there was bread on the table, but the father wanted, so it's a mother that was talking to me, and the father wanted him to wait for his main meal, and the father didn't want him to have the bread, but he was screaming and crying. He has the words, but he didn't use his words. He was screaming and crying. And then I was telling her, at that time, you can tell him to tell you that I'm hungry and it's okay for him to have one bread. Get him to ask you for the bread. Say, I'm hungry, I want bread. Give him one. And then you can tell him, one bread, then stop. Now we wait. Yeah. But they don't say those things, they don't communicate those things, and I think those are the more important than showing the flashcards every day. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Because then you're right, because then the child tends to depend on those prompts all of
Exactly.
and it's not, to be honest, very realistic to be carrying those flashcards around with you
For
everywhere.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. We are running out of time a bit, but
oh no, I feel like we just started.
there's so much to talk about, really. But I think one of the biggest challenges that I feel parents have, because those are the kind of queries I get, is like, when you have these really elaborate IEPs, and there is really no way in implement. I mean, there is, they'll tell you the IEPs usually have this whole detail thing on what needs to be done, how it's going to be done, but the resources aren't there to get it done. When I say resources, is that there's, the teachers that are needed for it, or the assistants that are needed for it are not available, or it doesn't reflect doesn't reflect the resources that are available to make that IEP happen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? And I think, as a parent, and I speak as a parent over here, that it would really help to have, yes, you have your detailed IEP, but you have something which is simplified, something like a cheat sheet, if you know what I mean, that is easy to follow, maybe a 2-pager or something like that, where parents are like, okay, this looks doable, this looks easy. It's
Yeah.
not overwhelming when you see such a big document sitting in front
Yeah.
of you. So that, I think, is something that would possibly help for centers and for schools when they're discussing with parents. That this is all that we're looking at right now. We're not looking at, so many things,
Yeah.
because from my experience in the past, that has overwhelmed me, and I've always felt the need to be more of a therapist, a teacher,
Yes.
mom, because I have
Yes.
to achieve all of this.
Yeah.
You know?
That's interesting because uh, I think that that's the job of the therapist. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that the parents shouldn't do what is written in the IEP, but if there is not enough resources, then those goals shouldn't have been written in the first place.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
feel when you're talking about parent empowerment, that is something that parents
Yes.
need to realistically think and discuss. Because
Mm.
most parents, a majority of the parents, the minute they find out, they get the diagnosis for a child, the
Yeah.
assessment's done, and you've got this whole, document sitting in front of you that these are the delays that your
Yeah.
child has. The parent
Yeah.
immediately goes in, oh, I'm going to dive in, I'm going to do everything the child needs to reach that milestone. And we've
Yeah.
all, I'm speaking for all mothers here, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And in the
Yes.
process, there's this whole burnout.
Yes, for
Very tricky
sure.
for some
Yeah.
people, and for some people it might, come a little later, but it does come. And
Yes.
there's nobody to help them navigate through that it's okay, we don't look at those skills right now. Let's
Yes.
just work on these things. Let's just work on mastering these things for now.
Yes.
I think sometimes it's important for centers, for schools, to tell that to parents, so that there's
Yes.
this burden on, because eventually it's the child the burden comes on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have seen this resentment then that parents have with their kids for not being able to achieve those things which are on the
Oh my.
IEP. I have seen that. Yeah, like I said, I've been a teacher, and a lot of times the mother is working, and
Yes.
you make this entire monthly plan for the child, that okay, you see the skill set of the child and you're like, he can do this, he's a bright kid, he'll do this. So you make all your lesson plans and you've done it for the month. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is in my initial days, I know better now. I would make this entire plan for the child, and the child wouldn't be able to get either their homework done or be regular in school, would come 2 or 3
Yeah.
times a week because the mother is working. So she's
Yeah.
there for all the parent-teacher meetings, but
Yeah.
she's not able to follow through on those things, yet she wants her child to achieve those things. It's
Yeah.
not
It's
the child's fault that
counterproductive.
he's not in school more than 2 or 3 days,
Yeah.
but somehow it comes on the child.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Absolutely.
So
I
now
think.
I know, and what I should have done at that time is been a bit more realistic, because I was, as a teacher, sitting and thinking, I've planned for this child, I've made designed all these and developed all these resources for the child to make it happen. And you know what? He's not showing up.
And he's burnt out as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, because he doesn't know what's expected of him. It's not, he's a 5-year-old kid. He doesn't understand why
Yeah.
there are, why he's being made to do all this, and he's not getting the help he needs to do those things.
Yeah.
So, anything else you'd like to add to that, Aliza, before we are cut short?
I guess I would like to say a final note, and this is a message to everybody. I think we should always come from a place of empathy. We should always start from there. We should always, like, in ABA, we always say, like, we need to know the baseline of the child. We need to know where the child is functioning. But I mean, if I were to say that in layman terms, it's just to get to know the person that you're working with, what they can do and what they cannot do, and start from where they can do. Don't go beyond that, because when you're stressed, you can't learn. Surprise, surprise. If you're stressed out, you're not going to learn. And you don't want to go there. You want to be at a place where it's comfortable enough at the beginning, and then you slowly push. And if you're pushing too hard, go a step back, because nothing's going to happen if nobody's having fun.
Yeah, usually we start with the push straight away.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, yes, some people thrive under pressure, that's right, but over time it's counterproductive and everybody gets burnt out. So it's better to have a simple plan to follow, an easy plan to follow, than to have like 50 goals on an IEP and not getting any of them and they're not realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And there's one point that I forgot to bring up. What advice would your be for a parent who is working with a school where, you
Mhm.
know, the child needs special services or needs to, what other things that the parents should be looking out for when they're working with an inclusion team of a school, for instance? How can they work as a team with the school? What can the parents do to work as a team with the school?
I think what you mentioned before, like understanding at least some basic things about IEPs, for example. Some parents don't even know what an individualized education plan is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so understand a little bit about that and follow up on the child's progress. And if there's any suggestions given by the schools, do follow that up at home as well. But again, you know, as a parent, you also need to assess whether this is the right fit for your child. And there are schools that have their own agenda, and there are schools that may not
Able
be
to,
the best,
yeah.
be able to cater to your child. So you need to be able to see that this school fits what your child needs. And
Needs.
usually those are the people who are empathetic, the people who want to see your child grow.
Yeah.
So these are the green flags.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important because, and I'm speaking as Asian parents over here, okay? We usually find out what are the top schools in the country. Bang, our kids need to be there. It may be a
Uh-huh.
really good school, but it may not be a good fit for your child and for your child's needs
Yes.
necessarily.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
that's a very important thing that you bring up, that if you
Mm-hmm.
see that the inclusion team is empathetic,
Yes.
and that's what your child really needs, then that should be your
Yeah.
green flag for the place. I
Mm-hmm.
like that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Aliza, so much. We've got some interesting pointers over here, which I'm going to summarize and put down so that parents going in the new academic year can go in
Yes.
armed and know exactly how they should be approaching schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And you have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, let me press stop recording.